So I'd like to call the order the MWPA Executive Committee meeting of January 6th, 2022. And Alice, can you please call the roll to make sure that we have a quorum present?
Novato Fire District.
Here.
County of Marin.
Here.
City of Mill Valley.
Here.
Town of Ross.
Here.
City of San Rafael.
Here.
Thanks everybody. So this is an opportunity for any requests to adjust the order of the agenda, please. Seeing none, let's move on to time for public expression. At this time, the public is welcome to address the executive committee on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised that pursuant to government code, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. And please silence your cell phones during this meeting and mute your mic when not reporting out. So opportunity for public expression.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, thanks. Thanks all. Let's move on to Mark Brown, please, the Executive Officer's Report. Mark.
Yes, thank you, President Goins, and Happy New Year to executive board members or committee members and to all our people in the public that are attending. Let me get my screen share going. Give me a thumbs up if you see it properly for me. Awesome, thank you. Rain, you know, we are all happy, I think, with this consistent low amount of rain that we're getting over the last couple of weeks. It's been really nice. I looked at the fuel moistures for the 100-hour and 1,000-hour. They're all through the roof, which is great news. However, as I keep mentioning, if the rain goes away, those 100 hours and 1,000-hour fuels will continue to drop. And then our 10,000-hour fuels and our heavier fuels are just they're going to take years to recover. So, but the good news is that we're getting the rain right now. Obviously, big news is the fires that occurred in Colorado. And ironically, it was when I was reaching out to some of our partners in the MWPA on how we can model a program that Boulder County has, and it's called Wildfire Partners. Wildfire Partners is in the west side of Boulder, whereas the fires were in the east side of Boulder. So there wasn't an overlap. But Wildfire Partners is a partnership where residents can volunteer for a D-space inspection. They can get financial incentives or grants to help get that work done. And then they're partnering with the insurance companies that if the residents complete that work, the insurance companies are guaranteeing that they will not cancel the coverage or they will not renew coverage. So I want to strategize on how we can implement a similar program here in Marin, because we know that cancellations and non-renewals are an issue here in Marin. And so if we can get ahead of that and create some type of partnership, that'll help continue to encourage people to get work done in the D space. And we know how important that is. Just a brief description about the fires. I mean, 6,000 acres with 1,000 homes lost. And I think you can honestly say that is a footprint that we can legitimately see here in Marin. If you look at the Mill Valley fire from 29, there's 1,000 homes in that footprint, and it was less than 6,000 acres. The Colorado fires were driven by what's called a fern wind, and those are the north winds that we get, the northeast winds that we get here, often called the Diablo winds. And just to give you a really brief description, because I'm such a weather geek, it's a atmospheric phenomena that happens with the terrain. And literally, if you consider air that's falling down the lee side of a slope, that's what a fern wind is. And I was looking at it, and there's 3,400 feet of elevation change in 6 miles. And so think about that much air falling that far in such a short distance. And then you've got the Boulder Canyon that takes that air and funnels it and makes it go even faster. Then it hits that plane in Boulder, and there's nothing to get in its way. So it's going to be a super strong wind for a period of time until it gets far enough down the plane that it's going to slow down. And that's because think of a river coming out of a gorge. It's coming out of a gorge at high velocities, right? And then when it hits a plane, it's going to be high velocity for a while, but then it spreads out and slows down. That's exactly what this wind is doing. And so that's how they created that phenomenon was created. And I'll guarantee you that wind is a consistent wind, not at 115 miles an hour. That was a phenomenal circumstance, but that is a very consistent wind. And out of curiosity, I Googled real quick to see how many lumber mills are in the Boulder area. And the reason why I suspected there would be a lot of lumber mills is because they love to put their log decks where there's going to be consistent wind to dry out their log decks. And when I look, there's a ton of lumber mills in Boulder, and I would hazard a guess it's because of that consistent wind, so they can dry out their log decks. So some similarities, quite a few similarities to Marin, but also some differences that I wouldn't expect 115 mile an hour wind to be fully exposed to all of our homes, maybe some of our wind exposed areas, but not quite like that Boulder fire did. The grant program, it's up and running now. We have a couple of applications that have been approved and a couple of applications that are in the process of being approved. And we are launching a media campaign. It's all queued up and ready to go. We're launching it on Monday, the 10th. So we're really looking forward to that. As part of our communication strategy, we have an earned media strategy, and I really think that we're getting some good traction in that. We had that recent article in the IJ about, and that was, what I liked about that was talking to some of the residents. It wasn't just talking to public officials about home hardening. And then the Environment and Energy News, a nationwide publication, actually picked the MWPA out of 6 areas in the nation of people that are being have local climate adaptation plans that they feel are worth modeling throughout the nation. So out of the entire nation, 6 locations were picked. We were one of them. And so a link to that article is on our Facebook site. Super short, super brief, but at least, I mean, we're such a novel concept and leading the charge, we're being recognized nationwide. Getting full speed ahead into our work plan development season. Anne has been putting a lot of time towards that and coordinating meetings with the ATC and operations and developing our strategy, how we're going to put that together, and developing the tool to be able to put it together efficiently. And that'll tie into our objectives and metrics here in a little bit. And finally, the evacuation risk assessment. We're moving forward with our interviews with the project proponent. It was going to be an in-person meeting. Given the increase of infection rates for COVID and the Omicron variant, we have decided to make that meeting full remote. Just we felt that was a prudent decision. And also some of the proponent staff actually have COVID right now. So we're working through those nuances and making sure that we can continue on. They have modified the proposal. I haven't seen the modification yet, but that to help speed up the time frame, because that was one of our concerns, was we didn't feel the time frame was at the speed we wanted it to be. And they've also helped with the budgeting on that. So I don't know what the total numbers are yet, but we will find out on the 11th. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, and I'll cover it a little bit more later on, but I wanted to hit it now, is that this is likely Allison's last meeting clerking for us. And so because of our agreement with RGS and moving forward with an administrative analyst. So I just wanted to thank Allison for all the work that she's done for us in supporting our meetings.
You're here.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Really fantastic job. Mark, a great report. Let's see, questions from the committee, please. Sashi, please. And then Julie.
Thank you for an excellent report, Mark. I really appreciated the way you kind of taught us about the Diablo winds. I always appreciate learning new things from you. I just wanted to note and that I'm really glad that you continue to look outside of our area for new programs like the Wildfire Partners program. But you and I have already talked about the IBHS program that's coming out. So the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety is preparing to roll out a new certification program. It's not public yet, but I got a preview of it and also shared it with Mark, where they will have a set of criteria. You pay for a 2-3 year certification, something on the order of $200, some of which you self-attest and some of which you need an inspection for. And it's things like Class A roof, your vents are taken care of. You don't have fences up against each other, and management of the 5 feet around your property in terms of vegetation. You can't have any flammable material, more than 6 inches up, in height above the house. And they are going to be rolling that out, and that is, IBHS does these things. They cannot, guarantee insurance companies are going to do anything, but the idea is this was developed in accordance with what they would want. So in theory, anybody who goes through that IBHS certification process should be able to, have more confidence in their ability to keep their insurance. So that's going to be coming out too, and that I think is something we should consider integrating into our strategy once it kind of comes out.
And if I could add on real quick, Bruce, if you don't mind, before we
Yes,
get
please.
to Julie, with that. After Sashi shared that with me, I was able to provide some feedback to IBHS with the recommendation that for programs like ours that have a fleet of defensible space evaluators, perhaps we partner with IBHS to help, and rather than IBHS bringing in independent evaluators. So they were very open to that suggestion. And at the same time, insurance agencies or companies are thinking of having their own inspectors. So this is a great way for us to partner. Instead of duplicating efforts, we can collaborate on this.
Yeah, and one of the pieces of feedback that I provided in there was that their model kind of showed this sort of flat home. And I'm like, well, what about a home on a slope? Because that's something that we deal with here. So hopefully they'll address that a little bit when they actually roll it out.
Okay, thanks both. Julie, please, and then Rachel.
Yeah, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I'll follow up with what Sashi and Mark were just saying. We went through a ton of remediation on our own home. And before we did it, we talked to our insurance company with the intent of getting them to reduce our premiums because we were making our home so much safer and defensible. And they basically said, no, we're not going to reduce your premiums. This is something that you should be doing, but we're not going to cancel you. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that the goal should not be to get your premiums reduced. The goal should be to retain your policy. And it costs a lot of money, obviously, to do everything that we did. But we still do have insurance, so that's good. All I was going to mention was, Mark, if you could put that environmental and media news thing on the website, because some of us, even though our children work at Facebook, don't do Facebook, we can't access it. So that would be really helpful. Thank you.
We'll get it up there.
Thanks.
Thank you, Julie. Rachel, please.
Thank you. Thanks for the update about Boulder. As my son goes to Boulder, we got some notifications about the winds. And Mark, as you're going through this, and it may be too early at this point, but it'd be good to understand what their emergency preparedness work was, as well as their notifications to the community. Do they have like an alert Marin? What happened? I mean, it was happened in such a short period of time. And the notifications that I got was just informing about the wind, but not necessarily a risk of fire. So I was curious what's happening with that.
Very much want to learn from that, because I think there's so many similarities for us to learn. I'm just being cognizant of their recovery right now and waiting for the right time to reach out. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, board. Let's go out to the public, please.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there is no public comment.
Okay, thanks all. Back to the committee for any further discussion. There's no motion required here. Okay, thanks. Mark, thanks very much for a great report, and board. It looks like we're on to something that we need to get ahead of this, and it looks like we've got good support and some good models to pursue. So look forward to you being a little bit more free, getting some staff here, eventually being able to put more time into some of this stuff. So let's move on to the consent calendar. Item number 6, the opportunity for the public to comment on the calendar. Items will occur prior to the committee's discussion of the calendar. The committee may approve the entire consent calendar with one action. In the alternative, items on the consent calendar may be removed by any committee or staff member for separate discussion and a vote. I'll now take public comment on the consent calendar. Any public comment, Allison, please?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, do any committee members wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? And I'm seeing no. If
I'll
nothing,
make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Julie. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion by Julie, second by Rachel. Thanks very much. Allison?
Novato Fire District,
Aye.
County of Marin,
Aye.
City of Mill Valley.
Aye.
Town of Ross,
Aye.
City of San Rafael,
Aye.
and the motion passes.
Thanks, board. Thanks all. Let's move on to item number 7. I would like to welcome Larry Chu. Hi, Larry. Citizens Oversight Committee report. Larry will present this item.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Happy New Year. Just wanted to provide you with a brief report. You're probably interested in knowing when the COC will issue its annual findings. We received the data back in December, and now the financials have been reviewed. The accounting detail, I can say was well organized, and it made it really easy to do so. That's me, though, speaking from somebody who knows how to read something like this. Just as a sidebar, make sure you always have somebody that you select from your various applicants from the public who is able to do this, because I think they pretty much left it up to me to do that. We're targeting the end of February to complete this report. Each subcommittee at this point is going to be presenting to the full COC, and we're going to be shooting for our January meeting to review the comments and any of the messaging that will go into the report. We'll then have February to review it, clean it up, and then issue the report. So that's what we're targeting. And at this point, I'll leave it brief and allow the committee members here to ask any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. So committee members, any questions for Larry? Julie, please.
Thank you, Larry and Bruce. Just a quick question, Larry. What are the various subcommittees that the COC is delving into?
Well, we have a financial subcommittee, which is reviewing, finances, financial statements. And then there's a committee that's reviewing the work plan. Both of them are to validate that it's within the guidelines and what was outlined in the enabling legislation for Measure C. Then we have a committee that will be doing the actual presentation and the layout associated with the report itself.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you, Larry. Sashi, please.
Thanks so much, Larry. I'm very appreciative of having you on there, because having worked with you, I know the level of skill that you have, and you just mentioned that making sure that the COC members have the skills to be able to do what's necessary to review that. Could you tell us more about what do you think that looks like, and also were there any sort of lessons learned that would enable future COCs to better do the best and most thorough job that they can do?
What you're asking the public to do is to read a document which are already in the same formats that you have it. But if there's some reconciliation, we're not doing an audit, but still trying to look at the actual detail itself, to be able to ascertain that, yes, it represents those numbers accurately. And, the COC did not have a lot of transactions to review this year. MWPA, it was like 710 or something like that. That's relatively small. And it's not like I had to go through and look at all 710 transactions, but the way that your accounting system is organized has to be done in a way that I can group specific topics and expenditures into the same buckets that you're reporting on your annual report. So I thought that was done very well and efficiently. I don't know if it was just Alyssa who did that as your financial director, but whoever was involved in that, I give them a lot of credit as well.
So sorry, just to clarify then, so you're okay with the way that the accounting system gives you the information and you were able to request what you needed, or that you would have preferred to be able to have more access to transactions?
Actually, I got what I needed.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Sasha. Thanks, Larry. Rachel, please.
Just a quick question, maybe it's to Mark. The audit, is there a timing on receiving that?
The last
that would also-
ETA we got was December. So
Right.
that's passed. So we have not received an updated.
Okay, because I imagine the COC will need that as well
Yep.
to complete their
So,
report.
we'll renew our request of what the timeline is for the audit.
Good. All right, great, thanks.
Right. Thank you, Rachel. Thanks all. Mark, any other questions or comments for Larry, please? Okay, seeing none, let's move to the public for comment on this item, please. Allison.
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there is no public comment.
Okay, back to the committee for any further discussion, provide any feedback. Julie, please.
Yeah, sorry. Bruce, maybe this goes to you and Mark. I'm just wondering when the COC issues its final report, will that be something that is on our consent agenda, or is that, do we discuss that as a board, or does it go to the executive committee? Just procedurally, how are we going to handle that?
Great question.
It is a great question. And also I think needs to be included in the process is the finance committee. And I want to get the feel from the finance committee and the executive committee as far as bringing it in as consent in the board or full presentation to the board. So I'm thinking presentation to finance committee and to exec committee, and then look at those two committees for guidance, whether it's consent or full board at the board meeting.
If you present to both of those, does that create a Brown Act problem?
I don't think you're contemplating doing them at the same time. I mean, it would be to at each meeting separately, and both of those are public meetings. So,
but that means that wouldn't that mean that more than a quorum of members of the board will have seen it before the board meeting, and therefore, like if we had to make a choice, I would pick the finance committee to look at that before it goes to the full board.
I'll work with Mark on that. I'm not sure of the makeup of each, so we'll figure that out. Definitely. Thank you for raising that issue.
Good question, Sashi. Thanks, and Megan for working that. I'm looking forward to the report and a full, shine full light on all of our transactions, all the work that we've done. We've made a lot of big decisions this year. We have contracts. We've partnerships with UC. Just all that we've done. So Larry, thanks to all of you for your stepping up and volunteering, putting your time into shining light on this. So we look forward to what comes next month and what follows. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank
Julie,
you.
please. Yes.
I would just, thinking about it, I think that it should not be on the consent at the full board. I think the whole board should hear all of it. Even if it's a brief presentation, I think the public deserves to know, and the full board deserves to know.
I think that's a good perspective, Julie, and I concur. And I see thumbs up. I see all thumbs up, all heads shaking. So wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, again, thank you, Larry. We look forward to further communication here next month.
Okay, likewise. Thank you. Have a good
Any
day.
questions, you can speak to Mark, and Mark will help you out in any way he can.
Mhm.
Let's move on to item 8, please. Objectives and measures. Mark, we've been looking forward to this. Mark Brown and Charlotte Jourdain, please.
We have been looking forward to this. I mean, technically, we started this process a year ago this month with working on our vision, mission to start off with, and then landing on our goals, and then creating this working group that was led by Charlotte. Myself and Ann were involved, and then we had Chief Tyler, Battalion Chief Todd Lando, Assistant City Manager Christina Lilovich, Fire Marshal Fred Hilliard, Fire Captain Jordan Reeser, and a couple of special appearances by Chief Weber, and then Quinn Gardner from the city of San Rafael was instrumental in our work. And so definitely wanted to highlight the people that put in many hours into this work. And a couple things I wanted to just bring up top, and then Charlotte can help me fill in any gaps, is one of the things I want to emphasize that we're looking for the detailed review of the objectives right now, not the measures of success. We're going to be continuing to refine the measures of success as we work forward. So, so that I think that's important here, is that we're focusing on the objectives today. And then some of the great conversations I've had with a few of you offline, public education had such a massive overlap in every single one of our objective categories. It was hard to figure out where was that line of delineation. Do we have it as a separate item in public ed? Do we have it in both both like DSpace over here and public ed over here? So you, and I'll use DSpace as an example, that a public education metric could be what is the change in behavior of defensible space. However, we left that categorized in defensible space because it was more focused on the defensible space piece. And what I really appreciate is how we are building the objectives and metrics into the formation of our 22-23 work plan. The product of the work plan submittal format forces the projects to go down that path. These are the objectives that we're going after. These are going to be the measures of success that we're going after. So that process is built in from the very beginning, and that product will live all the way to the end. And I know I said we're really looking at the, we're not really looking at measures today, measures of success today, but I know one of the topics that gets brought up a lot is the desire for measures being listed in acres or tons per acres or miles of evacuation route. And those aren't always the best metrics, because a mile isn't a mile isn't a mile. An acre isn't an acre. So I want to emphasize that we have to go in tons per acres. We have to list acres. But the important thing is that we have to connect it to what the risk level, what type of acre did we do the clearing for? What type of material tons per acre did we remove? Because treating 10,000 acres of grass where there's no infrastructure threat could look good as a metric. But did we really accomplish anything by treating 10,000 acres of grass? So I wanted to make sure that you guys knew, as we move forward in the measures of success, we will have those type of metrics, but they will be tied to what the risk is. And that's one of the other things, is our risk assessment is based on our CWPP, which isn't due to be evaluated or redone until 2024, 2025. We probably want to have a more frequent idea of what kind of progress we are for risk assessment. So Charlotte and I are actually working with the authors of our CWPP and with other entities to see how we can update that risk assessment more frequently. And with that, I'll pass it off to Charlotte for anything I may have missed. And before Charlotte says anything, I want to extend my thanks for the many hours and how she guided this group to the product that we have. It wasn't easy.
Thank you, Mark. That's really nice. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I don't have very much to add. Mark gave a good overview, and you have your staff report. I do want to mention that I think asking the project submissions through the work plan building process to select a goal and objective also allows you as the board to set objectives in when you open the work plan process, and to say, this year we're really going to be looking at projects that look at building temporary refuge areas, or this year we're really looking at projects that are going to be focusing on practicing evacuation drills. And you can decide to do it this year, or you can decide this is still like an early year in MWPA's development, or you could decide to do it right away. But the idea is that having these limited selection of strategic goal and one project, one goal gives you a tool to guide how you'd like the development of MWP activities to be focused. I think there was a comment about can we encourage drills? Can we encourage temporary refuge areas? That would be one way to do that. Would be for the board to set the tone as to what they're looking for in that current year work plan as far as the objective selection. Doesn't mean that you don't accept projects that are working under other goals or objectives. It just means that it's a way of prioritizing the dollars also. So you have the list in your staff report. I'm happy to go over them if that's helpful. I'll just sort of take your lead on if you'd like to go goal by goal over the objectives, or if you'd like to just go straight into questions.
What's the board's desire here? Would you like to have Charlotte go through this methodically so we see what's there and then comment, or do you want just general comments? What's your desire here?
Maybe start with some comments first so that they can be maybe addressed as we're going through.
Okay. I'm seeing some nods here. So I don't know whose hand went up, but Rachel, you're top left on my screen.
Okay, thank you. I have a question in terms of, are we looking at ranking in terms of between the goals and objectives, putting some percentages, because not everything can be equal. And are we looking at doing a weighted ranking of both goals and of objectives?
Okay, I think I'll answer that right now. So objectives fall under a goal. So they're not meant to be considered separately. As far as weighing objectives, I'm not sure how we would do that. I think that has to do with more the measure of our progress towards an objective, potentially could be weighted in terms of how much this impacts overall risk reduction in Marin, potentially, meaning like some objectives might have a quote unquote more important or lesser contribution to the overall risk picture. But keep in mind that, some of these things are going to be really difficult to measure. I think Mark gave a really good overview. The metrics conversation is going to be very interesting, and it's going to be very challenging because we are forcing ourselves down the very useful path of differentiating between impact measures and sort of out more like earlier in the causal chain outcome measures. So that makes the weighing all the more difficult. We're trying to be very data driven and very data oriented, which is what Mark alluded to when he said we have a call next week between Sonoma Technologies and Fire Aside to see if data provided by Fire Aside on a parcel to parcel level, discovery by discovery level, did you remove this, bamboo? Did you remove this acacia tree? Can that data be fed into the CWPP to provide an updated picture of risk that would show whether the risk at the parcel level has decreased? And then parallel to that conversation is a similar tool would be the hopefully soon to come risk assessment in terms of evacuation routes, which would give us a similar measure, but at the road level. So with these two, if we do our job well, we'll have really interesting and very detailed data on both the parcels and the road level. Then it's a question of how can we capture the data into something that meaningfully measures risk reduction.
No, and I just as a follow-up to that, I mean, I do think it's important if there's a way, as you were saying earlier, if we want to focus on a particular area, then we need to actually put a weighting towards that. So otherwise, if we have 4 goals and everything is 25%, then there's not clarity that we want to put more, right? Yeah. So if we want to say refuge, this is hypothetical, refuge area is 40% as a need to focus, then our work plans should be directed to 40% around that particular area. And I don't know if we've done the work yet to actually do that weighting so that it's clear where we want to put more eggs in the basket.
I think that sounds like a budget prioritization discussion then. That's outside of
and I think it definitely follows budget.
If I may interject, I would say that that's where we lean on our operations committee to say, hey, this is our strategy for this work plan. Let's wait. And they could give the weightings, like you're saying, and since we went with that, I'll use house out as approach, we could weight the D space higher then we weighted some of the other stuff. So as Ann works with the chair of the ops committee to create this 22-23 strategy, that's how that perhaps is how we could point the ATC towards developing projects that hit that weighting.
And I think it's helpful even on a, could be year by year basis that it changes, the weighting changes, but it would be really easy to say, hey, we're all going to focus on education in elementary schools, but that's not really what our goal and objective is right now. So we need to make sure the weighting is in that right spot.
Thank you, Rachel and Charlotte. Let's see, Julie and then Sashi.
Just in terms of doing the weighting and the prioritization, is that something that Charlotte and Mark, you're expecting the board to do? Or is that something that the ops and the ATC groups should do? I personally, as a board member, feel like I have no idea how to do that. And I don't think that that should be something that we're even considering.
I think the overall
strategy.
I think it's the operations committee that helps set that weighting for the objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can add to that, I think you have some, for example, one of the things that comes to mind is the implementation of Zonehaven. There's a lot still to be done in Zonehaven in building up that platform, in practicing drills, in communicating. And so I think it's about listening to what the operations committee tells you in terms of what the priorities are. And it's also balancing that with what staff sees needs to be a little bit of a nudge, right? So there's the sort of the nudge and the, okay, we'll welcome these projects. Maybe
so the board's role is receiving information from the ops committee and the staff and basically providing guidance and then blessing what you as the experts are saying. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Sashi, please.
Thank you. So I think one of the reasons that this maybe is a little confusing to think about is because maybe we should have used the word strategy instead of goal, because these are not necessarily goals, but they're strategies to, as Charlotte said, to reduce risk and reduce loss of life and property. These are the strategies that we've chosen to do that. And one of the questions Mark and I talked about was the way that the board sort of approved these goals and the sort of the language of them was in terms of the overall strategy to reduce risk within the county, and not necessarily talking about what MWPA's specific role is in that, because we're not going to do all of it. It's going to be member agencies. Homeowners are going to do things, land managers are going to do things that will be towards the same end. So I think our role as the board of this agency, it would be really helpful to understand what MWPA's role is in this. And Mark, maybe you can kind of, if I can phrase this in the form of a question, it kind of talk about what you see as MWPA's role in achieving some of these goals, because we talked about, later on it says, the member agencies are going to do this and MWPA is going to do that. Could you maybe address that piece of it?
Absolutely, and I think it ties into the whole idea of putting weight and emphasis on a certain objective compared to another, and then as the operations creates that vision and that direction, then as we work with the advisory technical committee and we make the individual projects, we identify projects that will be specific to implementation by the member agency as opposed to being implemented by the MWPA, and perhaps that's how we get where the member agencies and the MWPA converge, and that we're all pulling the rope in the same way and we have a similar strategy. And it's the work plan that identifies, okay, to achieve this strategy, the member agencies are going to do this, and then the core projects and MWPA will be doing, or public education will be doing this. But through the ATC collaboration, that's where we get the alignment and the I guess the delineation between authority versus implementation, or you follow what?
Yeah. And what I talked about the other day was that I kind of like the way that that you sort of phrased it. The MWPA's role is to really kind of provide the best available science, tailored and approaches tailored to the community's needs and desired level of service, because there is significant variation between each agency and what the community kind of desired level of service is. There's some that want to be very heavy-handed in their approach and some that want to be considerably more hands-off. And that is absolutely acceptable and fine. And we're still completing all of our goals if we allow that variation. So I think that's an important thing to capture here. Like, there's a language in the veg management part about appropriate level, and that the appropriate level is set by the member agency. So I'd love to see, Charlotte, I don't know whether you see a way to capture that what MWPA's role is versus the agency, and also, that variation in the desired level of service and of, how they want to handle things.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. That was an important part of the discussion for several of the meetings that we held with the working group. So in terms of, so the desire from the members of the working group was to display these goals and objectives with some text explaining a little bit and giving more context to the public. I've included in your package notes for some of the objectives that do that a little bit already. I didn't want to provide additional languages to the goals because those goals, the board has already approved those goals, and I was asked to focus on the objectives. So, but it certainly was a desire to add a little bit more, background and context for each of the goals when we display these goals and objectives on the website or on any public communications. There was a lot of conversation as far as the evacuation, alerting, and detection objective to clarify that distinction between the role of MWPA, the role of the fire agencies, and quite frankly, also the roles of law enforcement and the responsibilities of the residents.
And the individual, yeah, exactly, the individual residents, because that is a piece of it.
Yeah, and that's frankly, that's a task. That's a work ahead of us, is to educate the public about their responsibilities and their role. And it's part of something that can be measured under that, education and outreach goal also. So, so to answer your question, yes, we would like to, everything that's approved will be displayed with context and with sort of background explaining and giving more details. Of course, we try to be succinct with our objectives and our goals, but we have to recognize that's not always the only thing that, we sometimes need to provide a little bit more explanation and emphasis.
Okay, thank you. And to that end, under grants, the word incentivize, bothered me a little bit. I'm wondering if we can, because there is basically, if you want to do something and you can't afford to do it, that's what the grant's for. If you don't want to do anything, we're not trying to incentivize you to do it. So I think if we can, change that to, let me know what
words are actually were very carefully discussed and hashed out. And so the idea was, in the context of the grants program, grants are meant to incentivize the creation of deep space or home hardening. Clearly, if the resident doesn't want to do anything, that's sort of absent of any consideration about the grants or no grants. They just don't want to take any action on their property. I'm open to new word selections. I think that's absolutely fine. But if you would just let me know what you suggest, and I can tell you if there was previous discussions, because we did eliminate quite a few other verbs and words here and there. So I'd have to go back to my notes and make sure we're
maybe you just use the word from the goal, which is assist, just because because it is a completely different thing in my mind to say that we're trying to incentivize D-space versus we're trying to assist homeowners who would want to do it but can't afford to. I think those are two different things. And then my only other kind of thought, Charlotte, I know we're not really totally commenting on the measures, but Mark was saying something about the ability to put them in the context of risk reduction. And for that reason, I don't know that I think that weighting is as important as it is noting which things are causing the greatest reduction in the risk. That will show us what we need to weight. But is there a way, Charlotte, you think, as you're putting these things together and refining them, to show the metrics in the context of tons of veg removed in CWP category 2, category 3 parcels, or reduction in the risk score, or reduction by zone? Is there a way to present the metrics with those, with as part of that, with that context?
So the measures, like I said, it's going to be a very interesting conversation. We definitely will report them by zones and for the overall JPA. We also need to give ourselves a time dimension. What's interesting about, for example, the evacuation risk assessment is that we are actually including factors that affect the risk of an evacuation being conducted smoothly and without incidents. There are factors that our agencies cannot necessarily affect, because we want to build an overall picture of risk, including traffic, intersections. None of our member agencies have direct authority over changing an intersection. I mean, so we've asked, for example, the Transportation Authority of Marin is a big partner in the review of the evacuation risk assessment. We have a community development agency at the county level, including the local community planners or city planners. We have the Department of Public Works and so on. So we have other partners. What I'm trying to say is that we will get a risk score, but we also need to tease out what contributes to that overall risk score, and of the things that contribute to it, what can we, our member agencies, affect? That's what we want to report on. We can't report on progress on other measures that we can't change.
Exactly.
So yes, and then to answer your other question, so there was a conversation about reporting, for example, acres cleared or treated in the WUI versus outside of the WUI, in certain categories of risk parcels versus lower categories of risk parcels. Some members of the working group felt that this would be that towards the public, based on their experience, it's not necessarily always a good idea, in the sense that there are some high risk parcel. Maybe Mark, you can talk to this a little bit, but there are some high risk parcels that don't need any defensible space work. So saying that we are doing defensible space and all of a sudden it's only 60% in the high risk parcel category, but it's 80% in the low risk, might mislead the public. So the working group felt that and it's also, it could lead to a lot of stressful conversations about what is my agency doing on my parcel that's this high risk.
But you can do that, but you can address that easily by adding that piece in, like that. These were the high risk parcels that didn't need any work. These are the high risk parcels that did need work, and then the total number that now no longer needs work is this. So I think you can contextualize that.
And I think that's where one of the major success, frankly, of the grants program is that we now have all of our jurisdictions using the DSI app, which will allow us to calculate and to have data. That's huge. Down to the discovery level. So we'll be able to say on that parcel, which is this category of risk, there was 0 discoveries versus there was 15 discoveries. And of those 15, only 3 were remediated versus all 15 were remediated. So it's a lot of work ahead of us to really think very critically about how we slice and dice the data so that it's meaningful and it's reporting on things that can help us make improvements to our programs.
I really liked the sentence you just said earlier about how can we capture the data so it meaningfully addresses risk reduction? Is there a way to just put that notion kind of as the overlay of, all the measures need to be towards that? Like anything that we come out, like, is there a way to?
Well, so Mark said in his intro, and that's sort of what the working group landed on, that we are going to have what I'm calling in this document the risk reduction indicators measure, which are the more impact driven focused measures that allow us to also make change to our programs. If we see the risk is not decreasing enough, we need to adjust, right? And then there's the project outcome measures that will be more what we're doing, and they're important for accountability. They're important for all sorts of reasons. They need to be reported anyway for I mean, Anne can probably speak to this for things like CEQA, for, you know, for all of sorts of other things. So, you know, why not display them? It's sort of like we have them anyways, right? So we need to send them out. The way that, so to answer your questions about providing a sort of a disclaimer or to explain, the way the measures and the indicators are going to be displayed is going to be, in my opinion, from what I've seen, vastly different by goal. I think that we just have to you know, come to terms with the fact that each of our goals is going to be measured vastly differently. And so I'm trying to, it's still early in the discussion, but, you know, everything that comes from the CWPP and DSI, we can build very interactive, really cool data dashboards for people to slice and dice it almost whichever way they want. Things like education, I mean, that's a whole other kind of thing, right? So yes, we're heavily looking into that, and we'll come back to you all for more input before it's finalized. I'm sure. It's just you know, we've made some progress towards the measures. What was important to the working group was to delimit all the objectives first, because that's what's needed for also work plan development. The measures is still a work in progress.
And then I know I've been going on a bit too long, but I'll do one last thing here. Is the on your comment on public outreach and grants, if we can tie those into the DSI data, I think that really is going to help us with the, you know, with some notion of the success of, you know, the public outreach. You can't, you know, obviously do, you know, by household, but you can do by zone or by neighborhood or some way. So that would just be my other question is, you know, can you do that? But
Yeah, I'll just
hand
answer.
off. Yeah.
So for grants is now the MWPA grant programs for this year, and I hope for future years to come, is fully integrated with DSI. So we can report very easily on exactly which discovery, which type of discovery, by which neighborhood, which risk parcel is using grants to remediate. And I think that's going to be the most interesting thing, is if we find that, you know, the most important thing to us is eaves replacement, but only 5% of all our applicants are using grants to replace their eaves. Maybe we need to change the structure of the grant program and just put more emphasis on, you know, maybe we need to create an eaves only grants program. I don't know, like that's going to be where data is doing what it's supposed to do, which is inform us to create new programs that serve our constituent, you know, the community better. So for grants, absolutely, I can absolutely report completely related to DSI, as long as all the MWPA programs are what they are this year. I can't, if the MWPA funds other grant programs at the local level that are not using DSI, then that's going to be much more complicated, because then we have a whole other set of reporting and data gathering that's outside of what DSI is doing. As far as education, we did have a discussion about that at the working group level. And I also had parallel and separate discussions with Fire Safe Marin on this. Yes, the inspection program is a tool to educate residents, clearly. And it's an important one. But do we want to show all the results of improvements done through the inspection program as belonging to the education goal and objectives? I'm not sure. I think that there's going to be other activities that are conducted under the public outreach and education goal that are unrelated, even though they might help the inspection program. You know, we need to give ourselves the room to have this additional information as well. And I think you saw in your staff report that the working group felt it was necessary to look into conducting what I would call a market research level survey of the community to really help us orient our activities when it comes to fire prevention. So what we envision is to submit, as part of the new work plan, a proposal. I'm going to look at different consultants that can do this and gather some quotes and get some scoping underway, and then present this to your board as part of the work plan development, so that we can conduct this market level research that captures, through surveys, focus groups, and other tools of, you know, social science tools, what the attitudes are, what the knowledge, the current level of knowledge is about fire prevention, and then do that again in 2 years or in 3 years and see if we've made any changes through the way we deploy our education activities currently. So that is the idea. I know it seems very fluffy, it's not as targeted, but it's because this whole thing about education and outreach, we're earlier in the chain than we are. For example, the Defensible Space Program is much more, in a way, advanced because we've already deployed it. We have a system in place, we have data. It's not the case for public outreach and education, although we do benefit from the experience of Fire Safe Marin and intrinsic activities they've done until now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Sashi. Thanks, Charlotte. Julie McMillan, please.
Thank you, Charlotte. You've done so much work and given so much thought to these really complicated issues. So thank you so much. I'm just wondering if you and Anne have strategized that when the next work plan is being developed, if each work plan item will have some type of identification to the objectives that are being fleshed out, so that you can ultimately say, okay, for this objective, all these things will fulfill that objective.
Yes, I'll give it a shot, and then you can help me out. So before coming to you for approval today, we went to the Technical and Advisory Committee and the Ops Committee and discussed this. And both of these bodies very much appreciated the idea that upon submitting a project, they would have to select an objective, so they know exactly which objective their project falls under. And I think that's going to do a great deal in helping scope out the projects in a way that is streamlined and makes sense and down to what we really want it to be. I think your question is, are we going to ask them to select measures? Or are we going to provide them with a list of measures or indicators and tell them that's what you'd have to measure for you to fulfill this objective through your project? In an ideal world, yes. And I think that for some of it, it's already possible. It's not possible for all our goals since we don't have our measures fully flushed out for all of our goals. And then also for some goals, frankly, we don't need the actual local agency to do any measuring because we can do it at the centralized level. And that's a huge advantage that MWPA is going to have next year, is that we can do a lot of reporting, in particular, everything DSI related. Like I said, all the jurisdictions now using DSI. They don't need to worry about doing any reporting because we can do it for them in one report, and it's going to present it by zone, by jurisdiction, by fire agency, layered on social and economic, neighborhoods, indicators, anything you want can be layered on that. So that's going to be a very powerful tool.
Yeah, and if I could just add 1 or 2 points here, Charlotte, you did a great job covering that. Incorporating, choosing your objectives and potentially in the future metrics during the building of the work plan will help all of the member agencies include, budgets to actually do that and to actually measure that success, so that it's no longer an afterthought. It's just built in as part of the project. So I think it's going to work wonders to make sure that we're measuring our successes and where we need to improve. And then in addition, there are lots of partners out there that we're going to be working with to help us measure our success. Golden Gate National Park Conservancy is one of them, and they're working on ways to track vegetation management throughout the county for fuel reduction. So we've got a lot of great projects and partners out there, and I think it's going to be a really exciting year for this.
Thank you. That's great. I just have one other question, which is on the consideration of surveying people to assess their knowledge. I'm just wondering if that's something that is authorized by the Measure C surveying. I'm not a big fan of surveying. I don't mean to rain on your parade at all, but I'm wondering perhaps there are other ways to get that information aside from hiring a consultant and doing a survey, and the results can be so unreliable depending upon who participates and how they're feeling that day, how pissed off they are, how angry they are. So just wondering if maybe there are other alternatives to accomplish that goal.
So, do you want to answer, Anne?
One thing I'll say in that vein is, the chipper program includes a survey currently, and it could be that we, merge survey efforts so that we're not inundating the public with multiple surveys, and make sure we're coordinating and minimizing the number of surveys floating out there. So that's one avenue, that's a possibility.
Yeah, definitely. We have the Chipper Day program, and I think there is a plan to have a post inspection as part of the DSI inspections, sort of satisfaction survey also, which does not necessarily measure only attitudes and knowledge, but also just general satisfaction with the service that's being provided. I think that the idea is, we've looked at surveys that were conducted for the renewal of Measure A for parks. We've looked at other public campaigns, including in Denver, Colorado, water saving education campaigns. These other sort of public campaigns that are done, and we're benchmarking ourselves against that, and using a consultant, or using in the case of Measure A, was actually an academic group, using a group that comes from social science research, and can build something that provides validity in terms of the results, so that so that we can rely on the results. It's not just, okay, this person was not feeling well that day or whatnot. So we definitely need something that's scientifically sound, and that we can lean against. I think the idea is not necessarily only to use surveys, though. From what I know about these groups, focus groups would be another type. Now with social media, there's a lot that can be done in terms of placing pools and ads and these sort of things. So I don't know more about it at this moment. I think that the idea, to answer your question, I don't see any other way of measuring and providing interesting measures to the outreach and education goal, but by doing this. Unfortunately, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, but I don't quite know how we would go about that if our goal is to have measures and indicators for each objective.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions or comments? I have a fairly simple comment and question, really. I found myself looking at this package, and I think it's fantastic. And Sashi, this is a strategic plan, by the way. That we did vision, mission, goals, and objectives, and metrics. What I found myself looking at was, I went back to the CWPP, and it's a couple hundred pages. And what is our commission here? But it is in effect to wildfire prevention in the context of all the member agencies and the county work together to put the CWPP. There is an appendix that has 330 projects. Each project is prioritized as far as what's most important to the member, and also each project has a rating as to very high, moderate, low. There's a whole context that precedes our commission as an authority, that I think I find it interesting that we're not looking at something simple along with all these complex and wonderful, believe me, I believe in science and analytics and bringing people together and crunching 7 data layers and coming up with and algorithms to make things clear. But how are we doing in implementing the CWPP? 330 projects, all prioritized. I think that there should be consideration for a very simple metric, simple objective and simple metric, that we are implementing the CWPP as crafted and approved here in the county. And I think it can tell a story as far as who's getting what done, who's getting what they thought was the most important, most critical stuff done. So I would just request, Charlotte and Mark, that you would just ask the ATC and operations. The simple question is to the value of looking along with all this other this framework, looking at how we're doing in getting the work done that was identified in the CWPP. It's a simple message back to the public. 330 projects, 30 of them are very high severity. 100 of them are high. We say that, we've knocked out, the most critical, and we've knocked out 2/3 of the highest priority. Anyway, I would like us to at least consider putting this in context of something that people can really quickly understand. ACWPP, 330 projects, all rated by agencies. How are we doing?
I can say one thing about that. The starting point for determining these objectives was the CWPP. So we've tried to really be careful. I mean, that's how the entire discussion got started. Was our founding, one of the most strategic founding document is the CWPP. So we went back to chapter, I believe it's 8 and 9, that outline the action plan and recommendations, and made sure that each and every one of those was included in one way or another in the objectives that we crafted for your review today. Now, the list of projects that fall and how they fall under these objectives, what I've done as part of sort of a checks and balance to make sure that we were not missing anything, was that I took the last 2 work plans of MWPA, this year's and last year's, and I looked at all the projects that were approved as part of the work plan, and I made sure that we could capture them under an objective.
Yes.
So they're not the CWPP projects, but my understanding is that a lot of the CWPP projects were proposed to the MWPA. I mean, they were essentially that, because there was no funding mechanism before, a lot of the projects that are outlined in the CWPP are passed on to MWPA. So Mark, you'll have to give me some guidance here on what you'd like me to do in terms of next step.
Yeah, I think the one way to reframe what Bruce is saying is that the CWPP is our architecture of projects that we need to get done. And so Bruce is just looking at a way to quantify how we are doing with that architecture. Are we accomplishing the projects that were listed in Appendix B? And it should be a pretty simple metric to capture it. And Bruce just sees, I'm putting words in Bruce's mouth, but I see it too, that it just completes the circle. The CWPP said, this is what we need to do to make our communities safer. MWPA was put in action to make our communities safer. So if we look at the projects that are in Appendix B and see how we've done in completing those, then we start getting another metric there.
Thank you, Mark. That's a much more clear articulation of what I was trying to say. Yeah, the CWPP is our architecture. There's a list of 330 projects. This is what members said they wanted to get done, and we're setting up this whole related, assessment of specific goals, objectives, and metrics. But then let's go back and just say, how are we doing on implementing the CWPP? It does complete the circle, and it's a sentence, or it could be a short article in the IJ. Progress in implementing the CWPP that people can relate to. What we're crafting is very complicated, I think. So anyway, thank you, Mark. I said it in 50 words. Again, you said it in 20. Any other questions? This has been fantastic. There's no motion required. Mark and Charlotte, you feel ready to move? Megan, yes, please.
I don't believe you asked the public for input yet.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Let's go to the public, and then we'll close on this. Allison, please, public like to make any comments, questions?
Our first comment will come from Larry Minikes.
Welcome, Larry.
Good morning and Happy New Year all. And also I'd like to second Allison. Thank you for your calm consistency all these months. We'll miss you. Thank you. And Charlotte, really excellent, extensive report. Belco couldn't be here today, and she wrote a brief paragraph she'd like me to read into this, and so I shall go forward. We are impressed with success and metrics of the staff report and details on goals and objectives. However, we were disappointed that there were no direct references to the environmental concerns and actions. Our suggestion is that they be referenced among the goals and objectives. We would be pleased to assist in this effort, and we apologize for being late. in noticing the submission. And I don't know if I said so, but I'm speaking on behalf of the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership. So thank you, and that's my comment this morning.
Thanks, Larry. Duly noted. Interesting input from Bell. Thank you. Any other public like to comment?
I'm looking for any additional raised hands. And there's no further public comment.
Okay, thanks. Back to Sashi, please.
Sorry, I forgot one more thing on my long list of things, which was that on anything where we're talking about alerts, there's a lot of overlap with what OES does. And there's some, I think we've sort of acknowledged that there are some things that we're sort of moving forward on in the absence of some leadership from OES. But I want to make sure that we are careful of, their taxpayer dollars going to fund OES and their taxpayer dollars going to fund MWPA. And if we, continue to do work that bluntly should be under the responsibility of OES, then we are not really doing the taxpayers a favor by having those monies be, allocated twice. So just wanted to note that, and that's something that I think, hopefully, I know that Dennis is involved with having a review of OES by a consultant happening right now, but just wanted to note that where we're doing things that are supposed to be done by other agencies, we just need to be aware of that duplication.
Thanks, Sashi. Okay, other discussion? Seeing none. Again, so Charlotte and Mark, sounds like you're comfortable moving on then?
Can I respond to the comment that was made about environmental sound practices?
Yes.
Can I add to this or no?
Yeah, it's sure if yes.
Yeah, so this was an important part of the conversation with the working group. And what was decided was, or what was recommended was that this is part of how we do the work, right? So everything that has to do with how we do the work falls under the categories of values, which your board has already outlined for the organization. We do it in a data-driven manner. It's scientifically based. We have transparency. We provide data. We're fiscally responsible, environmentally responsible, and so on and so on. So in order to see through the tunnel of all the noise that comes when determining objectives, we set that aside, not because we wanted to set it aside, but because we needed to see through clearly what it is that we're trying to really narrow down to. When we provide these objectives to the public, we will, of course, it's very important to everyone in the working group, along the lines of what we discussed earlier in terms of providing context for each goal and objective, provide additional information about the way we conduct the work, which includes the environmental practices.
Thank you.
I hope that's helped, because I did forget to add that to the staff report, so I apologize.
That's valuable, exceedingly valuable. It is a value that we've adopted. It is a principle and practice. It's inherent in all the work we do. So I think that's a wonderful clarification. Thank you very much, Mark. Or how are you feeling about this?
I think we've received the direction that and the input so that we can make any modifications for full support when we go to the board in January. And Charlotte hit all the points that I really could not have. So thank you.
Fantastic, Charlotte. Thank you so much. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Let's move on to item 8B, which is the Administrative Analyst Grant Specialist Position Description and Salary Survey Update. Mark, please.
Something near and dear to my heart right now, something I'm getting really anticipating and looking forward to. We, through the end of December, worked closely with Regional Government Services, or RGS, in order to finalize our contract with a do not exceed of $50,000 so that I could execute it without going to the full board for approval. That's been signed. January 3rd, Ann and I had a phenomenal meeting with the two ladies that will start taking on some of the clerking responsibilities for us. They are well informed when it comes to working with Granicus. They have years and years of clerking experience. They know all about the records retention policies. They've worked through this. This is all the stuff that we've been struggling to be able to manage ourselves. And so they've already hit the ground running, to use an overused cliche, but we anticipate that their first meeting that they're going to support us on is our January 13th Operations Committee meeting. So they've already started digging into our agenda to help us support that. And then records management, as you know, we passed a resolution for our records retention system, and we have purchased the framework called e-file cabinet in order to retain our records, but we just haven't been able to implement it. Well, fortunately, both the ladies that we have on board have experience managing records retention systems, building records retention systems. So we already have a meeting set up with myself, Bruce Meyer, who we worked with to develop our records retention system, and Lori, one of our new clerks, to start building that records retention system. So I'm already seeing an offloading of some of the administrative work that Ann and I have been going through. And then the strategy that RGS recommended in dividing, we originally approached RGS with just one person to be the jack of all trades. And Sophia from RGS said, I don't think there is that person that can hit the ground running quickly the way you need it. You can grow that person. So why don't we divide it in two? One person focusing on HR and then a team focusing on the clerking. Well, I had a meeting, Ann and I had a meeting with Patty from RGS, who's the HR consultant, and she's already digging into the position descriptions for the administrative analyst. She's already digging into the salary survey and benefit package that we should tailor for this position. And with the goal that she will have a rough draft of that and the grant specialist to Ann and I by early next week, so that we can have position descriptions and benefit package included in our next board meeting, which we plan on posting January 14th. So we intend to have those two positions posted by January 14th. So you can see how quickly RGS is engaging with us on this. And then we've started to strategize with the vegetation management specialist, the WIMS lead, and the WIMS position, and reaching out to our partner agencies to get the position descriptions that they already have filled out for those, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then we do have the ad hoc subcommittee of the operations committee meeting tomorrow to discuss the structure, the funding, and the roles and responsibilities of the vegetation management specialist is meeting tomorrow. And we intend to bring the results of that discussion to the operations committee on January 13th, so that we can have a good packet for our February executive committee meeting to roll into the February board meeting for the remainder of the positions. So I'm very pleased with how fast RGS worked with us to get the contract in place, and then how immediately their staff started engaging with us.
Thanks, Mark. Board, any questions, comments? No, sounds like you have a lot in motion here. Let's go to the public, please. Any comments on this item?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Wonderful. Back to the board. Any discussion? Okay, thanks.
Sorry, Bruce, I just have a
Rachel,
quick
yes,
question.
Rachel, please.
I don't think it's necessary, but are these people on site, or are they able just to conduct being off site?
They're working fully remote.
Great. There's no reason, for what they're doing. Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, thank you, Mark. Look forward to your progress. Let's move on to item 9, which is Board of Directors meeting agenda review. The January 2022 Board Director meeting agenda draft. Mark?
Yeah, today's agenda is fairly light, so that usually means the board meeting agenda will be fairly light, which is good, because we consumed a lot of time talking about objectives and metrics, which I think was time well spent. And so I would imagine we'll have similar discussions during the board meeting, which is great, which is also good that it's kind of a light meeting. You will notice, I hope you won't notice it yet, but when the agenda comes out, you'll notice that we're going to recommend a slight agenda order change, and that is to move board matters up front, because that'll give Julie McMillan an opportunity to introduce our newest board member, Claire Molesworth from Bolinas. And what we did was we turned the retreat packet that we used a year ago into our new board member onboarding packet. And we paired Claire with Julie, and Julie is going to be Claire's onboarding partner. And so that, remember how we did the interviews where one board member would interview another board member? Well, Julie did that similar interaction with Claire, and it'll be Julie that's introducing Claire at that meeting. So we moved that up front. Looking forward to that. And then because of the way the holidays worked out and the complexities of our upcoming vegetation management projects, we are unlikely to see a veg management project on our next board agenda for approval as a project. I included it as a placeholder and consent, but it's unlikely for us to fill that. So with that, I'm open to any questions, comments, or discussion.
Questions from the committee? I'm seeing none. Oh, Julie.
Sorry, I'm just wondering what the educational session under 10F, what are you thinking about, Mark?
Anne, you want to cover that one?
Sure. We thought we'd cover a few CEQA and environmental review related topics. So I'll be joined by Sabrina Teller and some of our environmental consultants to cover a few topics during that time. We'll try to be brief.
Great, thank you.
Great question, Julie. Thanks. Thanks, Anne, for being on top of it also. No questions from the committee. Okay, to the public, please. Allison.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, thanks. All back to the committee for any discussion. No, Mark, looks good. Let's move on to item number 10, which is committee members can request future agenda items. So do any committee members have requests for future agenda items? No? Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks everybody. Happy New Year. At 11:22 a.m., January 6, 2022, we'll adjourn the meeting. And I'll see you all on January 20th. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, everybody. And
Bye-bye.
thanks again, Allison.
Thanks, Allison.
Thanks, Allison.
Amazing. Yes, Allison. Thanks so much.
Thank you.